Good evening, and welcome back. Drift with me tonight into a Florida dusk, where the air hangs heavy with heat, and the still water hides what the living wish to forget. There's a farmhouse out near Plant City, set between cypress and swamp, where frogs croak like ghosts calling from another world, and beneath that stagnant pond water, 2 women waited. The man who put them there was no drifter, no shadow from the road. He was a man of faith, a deacon, a husband, a father, a man who prayed for souls on Sunday and sent them to God by Monday. They called him Samuel Lee Smithers, and by the time Florida's courts were done with him, the newspapers had another name, the Deacon of Death. By all accounts, Samuel Smithers was ordinary. He was born in Tennessee in 1953, tall, quiet, dependable, the kind of man neighbors waved to without remembering why. He mowed lawns, fixed fences, and showed up at church early to set out the hymnals. He had a wife named Sharon and a son he adored. And on Sundays, his deep baritone voice could be heard leading prayer in the small Baptist church that anchored his little world. But underneath that calm exterior, something else churned. A black river winding beneath still waters. Years before, in another life, Samuel had been a volunteer firefighter. He'd been praised for bravery, until the flames he fought turned out to be his own. He was convicted of arson for burning churches in Tennessee. A man of God setting fire to the house of God. A strange, prophetic beginning for the man he'd become. He served his time, rebuilt his reputation, and by the 1990s had moved to Florida, to the quiet rural edges of Plant City, where the mosquitoes buzz like static in the air and the nights can swallow a man whole. To his congregation, Brother Sam was a man of mercy. To the women he found after dark, he was something else entirely. There was a piece of land, 27 acres of brush, oaks, and ponds, owned by an elderly church friend named Marion Whitehurst. She'd asked Samuel to look after it, to mow the grass, keep the place in shape. He was trustworthy, she thought, a man of faith. And that land, isolated and quiet, became his kingdom of deceit. It was there, behind that weathered farmhouse and rusted gate, that Smithers' mask began to slip. He'd cruise the back roads of Tampa, near motels that catered to the lonely and the lost, where the lights never stopped buzzing and the beds never cooled. There, he met Denise, New York Roach, 24 years old, a woman trying to survive on the edges of society. He offered her money, a ride, a place to talk, promises that sounded safe coming from a man who carried a Bible in his glove compartment. She went with him. No one saw her again. Days later, he lured another woman, Christy Cowan, 31, a mother of 2. He took her to that same secluded property. He'd been there so many times that the birds didn't startle when he shut the gate behind him. No one knows what happened first. A scream, a struggle, maybe a prayer. But when it ended, both women were gone. Beaten, strangled, and dragged to the pond. Their bodies sank beneath the surface, and the world kept turning, unaware of what the Deacon of Death had done. May 28, 1996. Florida's sun hammered the earth until it bled steam. Marion Whitehurst drove up to her property that afternoon, planning to check on the place. When she turned into the drive, she saw him there. Brother Sam, standing in the carport, an axe in his hand. He looked startled, like a man caught mid-sin. "Everything all right?" she asked. He smiled too quickly. said he was trimming limbs doing some maintenance, said the red on the concrete was just from a small animal. But the smell, the copper tang of blood, said otherwise. Whitehurst left in a hurry. She knew something was wrong. When she came back later that night with a deputy, the carport floor was freshly washed, water pooling in the corners. Samuel Smithers was gone, but the earth never keeps a secret well. The drag marks gave him away. They led down a slope toward the black mirror of the pond. The deputy's flashlight cut across the surface, and something pale reflected back. A woman's arm, drifting. By morning, divers had pulled 2 bodies from the depths, first Christy, then Denise. Both were nude, waterlogged, and beaten. An axe lay near the reeds, its handle slick. And the quiet man from church, the deacon everyone trusted, became a name whispered with horror. They found him soon after, driving near the church, wearing the same calm expression. At first he denied everything. He said Denise had fallen, that Christy had attacked him. He said the devil was testing him. But the tests were already done, and he'd failed them all. When confronted with the evidence, the blood, the pond, the axe, Smithers broke. He confessed, coldly, mechanically, like reading a verse from memory. He admitted he'd brought both women there. He admitted they were dead, but even then he could not admit to murder. He blamed accident, anger, God's will, anything but his own hand. To the detectives it was clear. Samuel Lee Smithers was not a man possessed by demons. In fact, he was a man who was quite comfortable with them. The trial began in December 1998. In court, the deacon's Bible sat unopened on the table before him. Prosecutors called him a predator cloaked in prayer. Jurors saw the crime scene photos, the pond water, the bruises, the axe marks, and something in the room shifted. Faith turned to fury. Smithers took the stand, soft-spoken and rehearsed. He spoke of forgiveness, of confusion, of not remembering. He said he'd been under stress, that the women had provoked him. He said everything but the truth. The prosecution didn't need sermons. They had science. Bloodstains in the carport matched Denise. A videotape showed Smithers and Christy together the night she died. And the axe? It matched the wounds like a key fits a lock. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They came back with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The Deacon of Death was damned by 12 strangers and his own arrogance. April 1999. In the packed Tampa courtroom, Judge William Fuente read the sentence. Death. The words fell like stone. Smithers showed no emotion. He stared at the table, hands folded over the same Bible that hadn't saved him. When asked if he had anything to say, he whispered, "I'm sorry for what happened." No one believed him. Outside, the Florida sun blazed, unfeeling as ever. Inside, Christy Cowan's father stood and spoke, not with rage, but with mercy. He said he forgave Smithers. He said he didn't want him executed. He hoped the man who murdered his daughter would someday find God for real. It was a mercy Samuel Smithers had never offered his victims. Years passed. The ponds grew over. The farmhouse fell quiet again. But on Florida's death row, Samuel Smithers kept praying. He filed appeals. He blamed his lawyers, the press, the world. He claimed illness, senility, salvation. Whatever words would delay the needle. Each petition was denied. In 2014, detectives reopened a cold case from 1989. Marcel Delano, another woman found beaten and drowned not far from Smithers' hunting ground. Her murder bore the same signature: the water, the violence, the faithless cover-up. Smithers denied it, but the suspicion followed him like a shadow to the end. 26 years turned the killer into an old man. At 72, the Deacon of Death was frail, grey, and unrecognizable, yet still unrepentant. He read his Bible daily, as if salvation were a page he could eventually turn to. September 2025. Governor Ron DeSantis signed the death warrant. Smithers' execution was scheduled for October 14th. His lawyers pleaded age, called it cruel, unusual, unjust. But cruelty had already been done decades earlier on a pond bank near Plant City. In the days before his death, he refused reporters. He accepted communion. He declined a special last meal. He spoke to no one but the prison chaplain, who later said Smithers looked almost peaceful. The kind of peace that comes only when the lies finally run out. At 6 p.m., the curtains opened. He lay on the gurney, pale beneath the sterile light. The straps tightened. A microphone descended. He said nothing, not to God, not to man. The drugs flowed. The silence deepened, and at 6:11 p.m., the Deacon of Death was gone. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, a pond in Plant City remained, murky, still, and patient. A graveyard that had already heard his last sermon. So ends the story of Samuel Lee Smithers, a man who built his altar on deceit and baptized his sins in the still waters of a Florida pond. He prayed to a God of mercy, but lived for a God of control. He preached righteousness while hiding rot. And when the mask finally fell, he met the judgment he'd long delayed. The Deacon of Death is gone now, but his story lingers like humidity in the night air. Thick, suffocating, unforgettable. A warning, perhaps, that evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it sits in the front pew, hands folded, eyes closed, praying for God knows what.
Thanks for listening. This has been Fireside Crime Stories, where the darkest tales are always read by Firelight. If you haven't already, subscribe, and before you drift off, toss a little fuel on the fire. Hit that like button, ring that bell, so when the shadows shift again, you'll be the first to know that another fire's burning and another story's being told. Until next time, rest well.